I'm Pamela Falk for CBS News. We're here with Ambassador Ron Prosor, Israel's UN ambassador on the crisis in the Middle East. Ambassador Prosor, there have been 5 ceasefires so far, and the most recent time the Israeli IDF said there was an unlimited one, but then there was another rocket. Tell us about it.
Well, it's very important to stress that Israel agreed to 5 ceasefires, including the 2 humanitarian ceasefires that the United Nations asked for. And Hamas broke each and every one of those ceasefires, including the ceasefires that they themselves initiated. As we speak, an hour ago, a Hamas rocket hit and killed 5 Israeli soldiers and wounded 4 in the outskirts of Sderot. And this is what we are dealing with. We are dealing with a terror organization that indiscriminately fires rockets into civilian populations in Israel, and also through terror tunnels basically are trying to either maim, murder, or kidnap Israelis. And this is absolutely off the charts.
Now, tell me about the tunnels. There seem to be more than were originally expected. Is that true?
It's absolutely true. Until now, we have revealed 30 tunnels. But when you say a tunnel, you don't really understand what it really means. Those are nearly highways in which they manage to store ammunition, missiles, tunnels that reach to the centers of Israeli kibbutzim. We have found and unfoiled the plan for Hamas to go out simultaneously to 4 or 5 different communities in Israel and do a mass murder against Israelis. So in the sense, you remember, especially at the United Nations, where everyone said, why doesn't Israel allow cement and steel to go in? Well, tons of cement are in those tunnels. Millions of dollars have been funneled to build tunnels instead of kindergartens, schools, or hospitals. This is what we're seeing. It's incredible.
Now, what do you think Hamas wants? I mean, in that sense, from the very beginning, every time there was a ceasefire, Hamas kept lobbing rockets. So do they not want peace is part of the question. I mean, Charlie Rose interviewed Khaled Mashal, and they seem to want something in the end, but in the interim, they don't seem to want a ceasefire or peace to even get there.
I know it's very hard for people in the West to really understand that, because it sounds a bit illogical. But Hamas, clearly, and it doesn't deviate from that, you heard it from Khaled Mashal, wants to eradicate and destroy the state of Israel. They don't think Israel has a right to exist. So from their point of view, they're just materializing their ideology. So by shooting at Israel, by terrorizing Israel, they, from their point of view, would bring Israel to either surrender or bring the international community, as they're trying to do now, to come out to help a terrorist organization that uses its own civilians as human shields, abusing them on a daily basis. This is incredible to see that. And sometimes I don't understand. I'm saying to myself, you don't really have to be a rocket scientist to understand that if rockets fall on your head, you have the right for self-defense. And this is exactly what Israel is doing. And
now, their main money of Hamas itself comes from Qatar. Originally, some of it came from Iran, but they seem to be less willing to continue all of this military engagement. It comes from Qatar, and yet the Secretary General went to Qatar, and he flew on a Qatari plane. Why isn't there more outrage at Qatar supporting militarily Hamas?
Well, there should be, because Qatar, in the sense, under the auspices of the Emir of Qatar, those terror tunnels were funded by Qatari money. The same way that missiles and rockets that are fired against Israel now could be put with a note made in Iran. So we have both the Qataris and the Iranians deeply involved in funding terror against Israel, and not just against Israel. If you look at the region, there's something very, very interesting. The Saudis, the Egyptians, the Gulfis are together against the Qataris and the Turks, who are basically trying to help, for some reason, the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. So inside the Arab world, you also have a division which is very, very interesting to see. And from our point of view, we see Hamas as clearly an organization which is part of the problem, not part of the solution. And if you look forward, I think that demilitarizing the military infrastructure of Hamas is absolutely crucial in trying to achieve the reconstruction of Gaza at the next stage.
Now, I want to get back to Hamas, but in terms of this kind of negotiation and the ceasefire itself, there have been a lot of reports that Qatar competes with Turkey, competes with Egypt, just to take the credit for some kind of a ceasefire. Do you see that from your end? And I should mention, you were just in Israel during these negotiations.
True. I accompanied the Secretary General on his visit to Israel. And I think he himself saw with his own eyes pictures of those tunnels. He saw missiles flying as he was there towards Israel. Some of those missiles flew in when he had the meetings with the Prime Minister, Defense Minister, and the Foreign Secretary. And he really began to see what is really happening in Israel. And it's quite a simple solution if you think about it. In a very, very complicated area, the equation is quite simple. If it's going to be quiet in Israel, it's going to be quiet in Gaza. I headed Israel's Foreign Service when we disengaged completely out of Gaza. We went out of Gaza never to look back at Gaza. What have we lost in Gaza? There's no natural resources, there's no oil. We have no reason to be in Gaza. We opened Gaza up, we gave them greenhouses, which they burned to the ground. We opened the fishing abilities for them to fish. Israel has a real interest in building Gaza as an economic place where we will have side by side to us Palestinian people who live happily.
Now, as soon as you got out of Gaza, though, that's when the militarization really increased,
absolutely.
Correct?
So what really happened was the minute we pulled out, instead of turning Gaza into Singapore, they really turned it into a terrorist hub and a launching pad against Israel. This is incredible because we went back to the 67 line, the green lines. There's no occupation, no Israelis in Gaza. And I think there's a bit in the international community, I would say one has to abandon the preoccupation with the term occupation, because people repeat the fact that, you know, because of that Hamas is doing. No, we went out of Gaza, never to look back. And from our point of view, we have nothing against the citizens of Gaza, Palestinian people, but we have a lot against a terrorist organization that has absolutely put on its, as one of its clear goals, to destroy the state of Israel.
Now, let me give you an argument that some people have made, the New York Times included, that Hamas was very weakened before this recent conflict of 2 weeks. Now they're a little stronger, and that is because of the disproportion of civilian casualties and casualties all around, because Israel has better defense systems. What do you say to people who are saying there are so many schools that are in the crosshairs and hospitals and children?
Thank you for the question. It's important for me to state, and very clearly, that every loss of civilian life is a real tragedy. It's a world by itself. And this is genuine, and we feel this way. As a democracy, from our point of view, this is the most important thing. But look at the other side. Hamas has built this infrastructure of terror inside schools. And I'm giving you an example. This is not me saying. 20 missiles in UNRWA schools, shooting from mosques, from civilian facilities, away from elementary schools, using houses as booby traps, using a child's, a baby's crib as a, explosive. This is all things that we see as we go along in Gaza, basically using the Palestinian people as human shields, abusing them, not allowing them, and from my point of view, committing a double war crime, using civilian facilities and human shields in order to shoot at Israeli kindergartens and Israeli schools. And what Hamas is doing, the international community should very, very, very clear against that. And Israel, what other choice does Israel have? What would you do if you would be shot in the middle of your cities by a barrage of rockets, 2,500 rockets in 3 weeks? That's an average of 125 rockets per day. This is incredible.
Yes, you had your phone on an alert every time a rocket was hit at the UN Security Council stakeout the other day. It was very dramatic. Now, part of the problem with getting to peace is that anyone, even when Israel negotiates, it's with Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. Now, in recent days, they've said with the unity government that they represent both Fatah and Gaza, the West Bank and Gaza and Hamas. And when I asked the Ambassador Mansour of Palestine, the Palestinian Observer, he said that both sides would recognize Israel as a Jewish state. But when Charlie Rose asked Khaled Mashal, he said no. So there are divisions within the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian government. It's very difficult to negotiate. Is that one of the problems?
Absolutely. Look, instead of making peace with Israel, Abu Mazen made peace with Hamas. A unity government where in the back office you have Hamas. Look at what's happening. Hamas clearly says that it doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. Hamas is firing rockets day in and day out into Israel. Hamas is built with money that came from the international community, and especially from Qatar and others, funneled the money to build all those terror tunnels. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars went into those terror tunnels to commit murder instead of building kindergartens, schools, and hospitals.
Now, sorry.
Please.
What I was surprised about was just that there was a recent poll that said with all of these visions of and news stories about people being killed on both sides, that the Israeli public is very much for continuing to fight.
I'll tell you what happens here. In Israel, we disagree nearly about everything. This is part of our character. This is part of our national character. On this, all of Israel is united. Why? Because we look at this and say, look, we offered a ceasefire. And because they disagreed and kept on firing, we are now seeing those terror tunnels into the major kibbutzim and cities and communities in Israel. This would have been a catastrophe. This would have been our 9/11. They were planning on going out with tens of terrorists into those communities, committing mass massacre and kidnapping, maiming, and murdering Israelis. We, in the sense, Israelis feel, that the fact that we found all this shows how endangered we all were. And Israelis, although we are paying a huge price with Israeli soldiers, our children who are fighting in Gaza, dying to protect the state of Israel and the citizens of Israel. And Israelis are saying, hey, this is a high price, but we want it over. We don't want this thing to continue the next time around. We want the military infrastructure of this terror organization to be completely erased. And that's why you see many Israelis, although knowing the price, are saying enough is enough. We've taken it for 10 years. We want to move to the next stage. We need someone on the other side who's willing to make peace with us, and that's not Hamas.
And final question, although it's the biggest picture question, how do you get to peace? I mean, do you just make peace with Fatah if they're willing, and then leave. What is Gaza then? I mean, it's just this other party to the conflict. How do you get to peace? Everyone's trying to figure out how this can end.
First, I'd like to remind the audience, and this is important, that the people of Israel, when there's a serious partner on the other side, Anwar al-Sadat in Egypt, we reached out for peace. We made all the territorial concessions to achieve peace. We had peace with Egypt. We had peace with the late King Hussein in Jordan. We also tried to make peace with the Palestinians. I myself was in Wye River Memorandum, in Camp David. Israel will always reach out to anyone in our region to make peace, but with the other hand, we will hold the shield of David very, very close to our chest, because only a strong Israel in this amazing neighborhood, only a very strong Israel will allow us to achieve a comprehensive peace. On the issue with the Palestinians, we are in negotiations with Abu Mazen to move forward. And he suddenly made this jump with a unity government with Hamas. So I hope after we will really take out the military infrastructure of Hamas, we'll be able, in the reconstruction of Gaza, to be able to come back into a dialogue, which is important for everyone around.
And if, final really is just how long do you see this going on?
Well, like I said, we are there in order to stop fire of rockets against our own citizens in our major cities. And if it's going to be quiet in Israel, it's going to be quiet in Gaza. We have no other interest, just to maintain the security of our citizens. That's what every responsible government would do. So in the sense, I wish that there's going to be quiet in Israel, and it's going to be quiet in Gaza too.